And so here's some assumptions that we're bringing to you. We don't know for sure what we're doing. And we are going to stand up in front of you and model not knowing what to do for you so that you can take a little humility back with you to your congregations and not know what to do there as well. And if we can all not know what to do together, we are actually more likely to make progress than if our congregations continue to dwell in the illusion that some of the members know exactly what to do, and if we just fall into place lockstep, we'll be able to grow our congregations. We're going to need to figure this out together. I do want to say, though, having said that we don't know for sure what we're doing, I think we do know for sure that human needs, including spiritual needs, haven't changed much over the past generation. Now, I've modified this through conversations with Tandy because I used to say over the past 30,000 years, but that seemed immodest. So just give us the past generation. Human spiritual needs haven't changed as much as human spiritual behaviors have. But the tools that we have to meet those needs now have to change almost yearly. None of your congregations had Facebook pages a decade ago. I can tell you that several of them didn't have Facebook pages 2 years ago, and it's now an indispensable part of the technology for how we share the good news of Unitarian Universalism. We can extend that one illustration into almost every aspect of congregational life and discover that there are analogous circumstances or changes that we're contending with. The other thing that I think we can say for certain is that community still matters. That there is a deep need for community. I think one of the great truths that President Peter Morales has been talking about for a decade now is the truth of the real crisis of isolation that exists in American society. Here we are with the greatest tools of connection, not just wired together, but wirelessly together. We have the best means of communication ever known to humankind in terms of technological assistance to be able to be in relationship with one another. And yet Americans self-report that they are the loneliest generation in the loneliest society in the whole of human history. Community still matters. But how communities form and how they maintain themselves is changing. And we need to learn to be able to differentiate between what it is that we have to offer, what it is that's abiding, and what it is that's continually changing. And so we need to understand that community is the water, and we need not to confuse the way that water flows to us with our need for that water, with our hunger, our thirst for that water. So there was a time when we could scoop it up just from the stream. Well, we don't do that anymore. And there was a time when we would pull it up with a bucket from a well in our neighborhood. We don't do that anymore either. There was a time that it just flowed through the pipes, and that was our main access to the water supply. Now we can buy it in bottles, no matter how much we may hate that. We find our supply in various ways, and a similar reality exists in congregational life. So the situation is changing, but there are health signs out there. So, Unitarian Universalist congregations, while some decline each year, some are plateaued. Nearly a third of our congregations continue to grow. We are actually in an enviable position. Tandy and I just did an analysis of how our association compares with other fairly liberal and mainline denominational bodies. And we are actually continuing to hold strong. We have some congregations that are declining, some that are increasing, some that are plateaued, but we actually continue to significantly outperform the curve of every other major liberal, religious, or mainline denomination in America. And, well, we can be happy for that, and it's a challenge, because we can't count on that happening in perpetuity. And in fairness, we are something of a boutique denomination among department stores. And so we shouldn't become immodest about what we are able to do, but we actually should take some pride and some encouragement from our success overall. And what would be unforgivable would be for us to ever fall into despair about our circumstance. The prospects for Unitarian Universalism are good. The field in which we're operating remains fertile, and we need not be afraid of the changes in the religious landscape. In fact, they are tilting in our favor. A second observation that I would make is that our growth is more even across regions than any other denominational body. This came as a surprise to us because some of you, well, we're in New England here, aren't we? Some of you may have heard a myth, a fabrication actually, some might even call it a lie, about our inevitable decline in this part of the country and our growth prospects in other parts of the country. Well, as it happens, our regions are all pretty close together in terms of how well they're doing. And that tells us that, in fact, we can grow Unitarian Universalism anywhere and everywhere. There is no destiny involved in your geographic location. We can grow vibrant, fresh, new congregations in New England, and we can revitalize congregations that already exist. And we can grow similarly fresh and vibrant congregations and revitalize existing ones in every region of this country. And so we need to give up the old story that there are regional differences in our growth capacity. It's simply not true. The third observation I would make in terms of healthy signs is that our growth in worship attendance, this is different than membership. You probably have been obsessed over the years about counting your membership numbers, and that's a good Methodist behavior, and I'd like to encourage you to continue it. Not as an obsession, but just as a good spiritual practice in your congregation. It matters what we count. We measure what matters to us, and it's important to maintain good statistics. But the most important numbers that Tandy and I and that other congregational consultants work with don't usually include the membership number. We look at attendance and we look at money. Those are the two measures of a congregation's real vital signs. And while the legal membership is important, especially if you happen to be, changing your real estate or moving or applying for a loan, what we see that marks health is actually the attendance number. Well, as it happens, Unitarian Universalist attendance growth outpaces that of the evangelical traditions proportionate to our size. Again, we're a boutique in this larger landscape of retail religion, but we're doing well as a boutique, and more people are coming to our congregations than we realize. Next set of healthy signs, Tandy. One of the things that we've learned from studying congregations is that congregations with strong leadership rotation are growing. By this, I don't mean that we push people out of leadership positions, but rather that people don't stay in the exact same leadership positions forever. Several years ago, the little congregation that I served on the Canadian prairies as sort of a hobby for 29 years, we had a board member who was coming up to his 50th anniversary as a member of the board. And I asked then President John Burens if he would send a letter of greetings. And John called me on the phone before writing a letter, and he said, I'd be happy to send a letter of congratulations, but can you tell me, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? And I was able to assure him that in that particular case, it had been a good thing. But the fact that it was a good thing was really unusual. Typically, that would be a dreadful thing in the life of a congregation. What we see is that those congregations who help their leading members find new opportunities to serve in the congregation while vacating the places that they have served, and who do so in a systematic and relatively frequent way, discover that they create the fluidity in the system that helps them to grow. And so leadership rotation, we discerned, was a very important fact in congregational vitality. We've also discovered that our appeal across educational categories is broadening. Now, for those of you who it's not immediately obvious what that means, let me say we have more high school graduates and high school dropouts in our congregations than we have had in half a century, and I want to tell you that that's actually a good thing. We are no longer destined as a movement to be the graduate school at prayer. There's nothing wrong with having a graduate degree. I have one of my own. And I worked hard for it. But we had become a pretty exclusive community educationally. We had the narrowest spectrum of educational attainment of any major denomination in America. And we have finally reached the stage where that is starting to change. And finally, our congregations are becoming much more diverse than they were in the past. We haven't exactly reached the tipping point, but I'm convinced we're actually finally racing towards it rather than sauntering.